Chapter 13 of The Day the School Blew Up is called The Cost. Dad spent the rest of the weekend on the phone preparing for an emergency board meeting Sunday afternoon. The meeting was to start at 3 o'clock, and Dad's bosses were going to be there. "Is Dad going to get fired?" I asked Mom Sunday morning after breakfast while she washed the dishes. "No, honey," she replied, drying off a casserole dish. "The people who are coming are there to help pastors and churches. And by the looks of it, we will need all the help we can get." "Is Mr. Purvis going to be there?" "Yes, Peter." Dad's meeting lasted for 5 hours. Mom called his cell phone every hour to check in, and the answer was always the same. I could hear it since she had the phone in the kitchen on speaker the third time she called. "Not yet, sweetheart. I gotta go." I could hear heated voices in the background and even the crashing of a steel folding chair. "Sounds like a wrestling match," I said, wishing I could be there. "That's probably not too far from the truth, Peter," Mom replied, hanging up the phone. "I wonder if Mr. Purvis is wearing a mask or tights, like they do on television." Mom raised an eyebrow. "Peter, are you watching wrestling? You know that's not allowed in this house." "I know," I said. "That's why I watch it at Harley's." After Mom made a call to Harley's mother, she suggested that we play a game. Mary wanted to play Candyland, and for once we were in agreement. I realized Candyland is a game for little kids, but my folks added a new rule a couple years ago. We play with real candy. Therefore, it is always the first game to be suggested when we're asked to choose. Mom and Dad allow it only on special occasions, and since this weekend was so full of stress, Mom agreed to our request, in hopes of lightening our hearts. We needed it. I wasn't sure if Dad could hold his own at the meeting as well as he had that morning in the parking lot. At 8 o'clock, Dad called to say we should get ready to come pick him up. Mom had dropped him off earlier that afternoon since she had some errands to run. She had thought the meeting wouldn't last more than 2 hours. So when Dad called, we packed up the game and drove over to the church. When no one came out after 20 minutes, I was elected to go inside as a scout to see the status of the meeting. I felt like a spy, which is why I agreed to do it. I slowly opened the door to the church and crept in. It was mostly dark inside the foyer, except for the lights in the hallway that led to the boardroom. I could hear voices, but they were more subdued and tired than the ones I'd heard before on the phone. I crept softly down the hall past the pastoral offices, the cradle roll and primary rooms, and the library. The boardroom was the last room on the right, and the door was slightly opened. I got down on my hands and knees right by the doorframe and peeked through the crack to see what was going on. There were a lot of black suits and even darker expressions. Mr. Purvis was silent. Dad was at the end of the table, scribbling some notes, and everyone else seemed to be waiting for him to finish. "Okay," Dad said, making one last mark on his notepad with his pen. "Here's where we stand. The cost to replace the boiler, as estimated by the contractor, is $45,000. I almost gasped at the figure, but put my hand over my mouth and kept silent as Dad continued his summary. "With the funds pledged yesterday and this morning, the church can raise $10,000, but even that is going to be tricky because we're still paying off the new parking lot and donors are stretched thin. The conference can grant us $25,000, making a total of $35,000. This still leaves us $10,000 short, with another major problem. Dad nodded towards another gentleman with a buzz haircut, thick frames. "Our education director, Mr. Tibbs, has pointed out that winter is on the way, and since the boiler provides heat for our school, we could be forced to shut down the facility for the year." This time I gasped, and I heard my dad pause abruptly. I tore back down the hallway as quickly as possible and dashed back to the car, breathless. "Peter?" Mom asked. "Are you all right? Where's your father? Is the meeting over?" I don't know," I said between gasps for air. "Maybe." "Why are you so out of breath, Peter?" asked Mary from the back seat. "Are you out of shape? You know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and you should treat it better. Maybe you should finish your homework earlier so you can get some exercise." I regained my breath and turned around to face Mary. Good idea. Maybe I could start by coming back there and— Peter! Snapped Mother. I don't want to hear it. Now hop in the back seat. Here comes your father, and if I so much as hear a peep out of you, you will get exercise by running around the house for an hour. I grumbled and crawled back next to Mary, who was beaming. Mary, I said, looking at her sweet face with pigtails, you can try fake crying, but just know that my fist will be real when it hits your arm. Her smile faded, and she looked out the window. Dad opened the door and looked at me curiously, but said nothing. How was the meeting? Asked Mom. I sent Peter to check on things, but he came back all out of breath and didn't say much. Dad got in and gave me a look, but said nothing before turning back to Mom. I don't want to talk about it. I'll tell you when we get home. Mom nodded and began to drive. No one said a word on the way home, especially me. I knew everyone wished they knew what went on in that meeting, but if they knew what I did, they'd wish differently. I may not be a genius at math, but I knew enough to add up the numbers and figured out the consequences discussed at Dad's meeting. The school needed $10,000 or it would have to close. By some strange coincidence, the winner of the academic contest would win $10,000. The implications for my future were frightening, and I hope no one else on the church board was thinking what I was thinking.